y paulatinamente se va aumentando de acuerdo a los niveles de, por supuesto, sistemáticamente, porque si lo dejas de hacer vuelve a lo mismo, ¿no?
Cuba's new agriculture uses a variety of soil-enhancing alternatives to rebuild and maintain the soil. Crop rotation, composting, and green manure, which is a process of plowing young vegetation into the soil. Many tons of organic compost are produced, using kitchen scraps, rice hulls, and other organic matter. Worm humus is made in long troughs, where worms are fed organic waste products. This makes a richer fertilizer than regular compost.
Una tonelada de humo de lombriz equivale a 6 de materia orgánica.
Today, 80% of Cuba's agricultural production is organic.
The lack of fuel drove us to use less machinery, to go to smaller farms, to combine different crops in one small piece of land, preventing pest spreading.
If you have 1 million plants of corn, you will have 1 million bugs that eats only corn, and you have a pest.
We developed many biopesticides and many biofertilizers. Today we are even exporting to Central American countries and other Latin American countries. We are exporting biopesticides and biofertilizers. Remember, Cuba has one advantage. If the population of Cuba is 2% of the population in Latin America, Cuba has 11% of all the scientists in Latin America.
It's difficult to grow certain crops in Cuba's heat, so farmers use a variety of mesh covers to cut the sun's rays.
We can extend the season and just using something as simple as putting a fabric, a porous fabric over a simple structure that you can remove when a hurricane is coming and you can build again. It's very simple, and this fabric also allows you to control the pest because you not only reduce the radiation and the heat, but you also reduce the number of bugs entering into the area.
In the 80s, in Cuba, were used 21,000 tons of pesticides, chemical pesticides. Now, it's 1,000. We are using 21 times less pesticides. This is good for the environment, this is good for the health, and this is also good for the soil.
Cuba uses crop interplanting to reduce the need for pesticides and make their agriculture more sustainable.
Nobody fertilizes a forest, and nobody irrigates a forest. The forest do by itself. So if you are able to create like something like a food forest, your main effort is like pick the fruits and pick the products. And so in that way, the effort is less. You work hard in the very beginning, but once the system is established, you work a lot less. It's what we call lazy people agriculture, but it's because you are working with nature, not against nature. These people in the conventional system work against the nature.
Arriba! One of the good sides of the crisis was to go back to oxen, to use animal. Not only that they save fuel, they do not compact the soil the way the tractor does. They exert less pressure, and even the legs of the oxen remove the earth.
Older farmers who still remembered how to grow and train oxen were set up in training schools. In a little over a year, most cooperatives had someone trained, and the process of raising thousands of oxen had begun.
A pair of oxen is not the same as a tractor. A man can work 8 hours in a tractor, you have conditioned air and a CD player, but you cannot work for those hours because oxen just go to the floor, they say that's it, you know. But you need also to train those people and train the oxen as well. So it was necessary a result of a change of mind, the change of scale. And it was a big effort, but how much money they save in fuel, how much money they save in parts, how much money they save in tractors. But I should say, how much money is the pollution of these tractors? It has to be analyzed from several approaches. They did it because they have to. But from a few years point of view, there are many benefits.
To increase food production, the government worked with farmers to find local solutions. The result was smaller farms and cooperatives with a high degree of privatization and autonomy. 40% of the large state farms were divided into privately owned cooperatives. Tens of thousands of acres of land were leased rent-free to small farmers. Decision-making was localized with fewer state regulations.
Two requirements. You grow things there. If you don't grow things there, we take you the place away from you and give it to somebody else. And second, that the land is delivered to you in usufruct. Usufruct is an old Roman word that means that you can use the land without paying taxes or without paying for it. But if this land is needed for another purpose, it can be like you have to give it back to the government.
These smaller farms and cooperatives were better able to use the new sustainable practices vital for growing food organically.
12 to 50% of the total arable land is in private hands in Cuba. So these are the private farmers. They are by far the highest production per acre and per person. In second places, it's like co-ops, cooperative. They are the second. And third is like huge government states.
These new private farms and co-ops also began to function in new ways.
But we have credit and services co-ops. What does that mean? You don't want to join your lands with me? We don't. So we are together in a co-op for credits, to buy the seeds together, to hire the machinery, for this stuff. But we don't have to join their land. So it's a way of decentralized, but centralized at the same time.
Thousands of families moved to rural land. With land rights guaranteed, a sense of ownership led to greater productivity. Private farmers' markets and new export markets led to greater production.
The communities have changed. It's the local economy. People were exchanging things. Many of these gardens, they supply for free food to elder people's circles, daycare centers, schools, working centers, pregnant women, and they do it for free. And they don't do it because it's compulsory. They do it because they want it. They want to do their little part to the society. But in other places, people don't know their neighbors. They don't know their names. They don't say hello to each other. Here, no, the neighbor knocks the door and say, I need some salt, I need some sugar, whatever. I brought you an avocado. No? And recover this sense of neighbor. For me, it's not going backwards.
Without oil for transportation, Cuba's educational system was threatened. Decentralizing universities provided people with access to nearby schools for higher education and lessened the impact of fuel shortages.
The example of the universities now that to put in every municipality also, because in my opinion, transportation and housing is right now the biggest problem in Cuba, because this depends more on oil.
This large building was the most exclusive school in Cuba, the Sacré-Cœur, but today is the University of Medical Sciences. For your information, Cuba had 3 universities, but today has about 50, 7 of them in Havana.
Medical clinics and schools are available throughout Cuba. During the crisis, the Cuban government continued supplying its citizens with free health care and education.
Very different from what happens worldwide when there's an economic crisis. The first thing they do is cut down on social services. This was not the case.
Doctors, nurses, and social workers live within the neighborhoods where they work, part of the social fabric of the community. Cuba's free medical care helped them in the crisis. In spite of the hardships, they maintained a lifespan and infant mortality rate roughly equal to that in the U.S., even though the average Cuban consumes less than 1/8 the energy of the average American. Overall, the economic crisis improved Cubans' health. Increased walking and biking reduced diabetes and the number of heart attacks and strokes. The Cuban diet changed. Fat consumption was reduced, while more vegetables and a wider variety of vegetables were eaten. Cuba actually trains more doctors than they need and sends them to developing countries around the world. They also exchange doctors and medical expertise with Venezuela in return for oil.
When I look at other countries, developed countries, everything goes around making the automobile more efficient. How much energy do you need to produce a car? You have to spend energy on producing a car, and later you have to find the fuel to make the car move. So think about reducing the number of cars.
During the worst of the crisis, there was very little fuel for cars. The freeway and country roads were almost empty. Cuba needed to develop a mass transit system overnight. With few resources, they had to be innovative. Old trucks were made into buses with canopies to keep off the rain and steps welded on the back. Another solution was the camel, a trailer pulled by a semi-tractor that can carry up to 300 people. In Havana and other provinces, carpooling and hitchhiking are common. Government cars are required to pick up anyone who needs a ride. The loss of fuel for transportation also affected small towns and cities. There, people turned to horses and mules for transportation. During the first years of the special period, bicycles were a necessity. This was not easy for Cubans who had been used to cars and buses.
It requires more consciousness and more awareness about the use of the bicycle, that the bicycle is not something that we have to use because we don't have fuel or we don't have buses in the city. The question is that the bicycle never contaminates, is more healthy, and for short distances is very practical.
But if you have to move 20 kilometers a day, back and forth, 40 kilometers a day in a Chinese bicycle, no gears, all steel, after 5 years, you hate it. And that was what happened in Cuba. Like at some point when there are a little bit more camels and buses, people just quit because they were sick of it.
One day people start thinking about the end of the car. There will be an era, a moment in the life. So one day the car appeared and one day the car will disappear. The car will be something that we will remember as a moment in the development of the mankind.